Okay, all right. Without any further ado, I've started the recording, so away you go, Boon.
Okay. Um, all right, we're going to chat a little bit about Windows Server 2012 Essentials and basically talk about some of the issues, some of the ways you can use this to integrate with Office 365, some of the issues you may come across when you do this, and also perhaps, if we have time, a few little issues that have cropped up since Windows Server 2012 R2 Essentials was released. So basically, some of the things that are new if you've never worked with Essentials or Windows Server Essentials R2 and you haven't seen it yet, there's a few new things that are available in there. First of all, there are three different ways you can get Essentials right now. You can get it as a role in Windows Server 2012 R2, or you can get it straight as a SKU directly as Essentials, or you can get it in a special OEM bundle where you would get the ability to virtualize Essentials as a single virtual machine on Hyper-V, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. Apart from that, the dashboard's been reworked a little bit, and there are some new features in the dashboard which we may take a quick look at. It is now ready for the cloud. Office 365, Intune, and Azure are all integrated by Wizard into the dashboard and into Essentials. We have health monitoring and reporting, which is now built in as no longer an add-in to the dashboard. It is integrated seamlessly into Essentials. There's groups management. In Server 2012 Essentials, you did not have the ability to create groups except through the Active Directory users and computers, and now you can go in and create your own groups within the dashboard itself. Mobile device management is a new thing as well, the ability to connect various devices to Windows Server 2012 R2 Essentials. And also there is now the ability to integrate SharePoint either via Office 365 or your own on-premises SharePoint into the dashboard and provide access to users. And one little thing, the media server ability is now removed from the dashboard, so you can no longer access the media server, which was really more of a home user feature rather than a business feature. So going a little bit more in detail about the role and sorry, one more thing. Branch cache is now included in the server as well. But we want to go a little bit more about what is the Windows Server Essentials experience role. So if you have Windows Server Standard or Data Center, and if you go to server roles, you can now see that there is a feature, a role called Windows Server Essentials Experience. From within that point, you can actually tick the box and install the role, and what that will do is install the dashboard and install all the bits and integration that create a Windows Server 2012 R2 Essentials. There are a few little things that you may be thinking about straight away. In Essentials in the past, you could only have a single server running Essentials within the Active Directory or within the domain. In this case, the very first Essential server that is turned on will become the primary domain controller, and every other Essential server that is turned on becomes a domain controller, but not the primary domain controller. So this can be used to share the load in larger corporate enterprises where you might have 200-300 users and 200-300 client PCs. Obviously, with the client backup, you can't really run a backup of that many clients. The recommendation is up to about 100 before it becomes unsupported. So after that point, you would probably need to enable a couple more Essentials servers if you wanted to run client backups. So the functionalities are now enabled as with a server role across all mainstream server editions. It's the similar type of experience that you would get when you install the Essentials in the past. You can also, of course, use PowerShell to run unattended deployment and configuration. Now, for small businesses, there are a couple of scenarios which we can deploy. The first one is a single server, physical server configuration. This is the standard configuration that we see typically in most very small businesses. It is a replacement to the peer-to-peer networking, and we use where some people will use a desktop PC as a server. And you may receive this pre-installed on physical hardware. All your apps will run on the server. The messaging and collaboration are in the cloud, and other the client probably uses other cloud-based apps and services. So there's no Hyper-V partition. The server software runs directly on the hardware. In a newer edition that is now available, the Essentials edition includes the Hyper-V role. So the deployment is using a single license. It's not two licenses, it's a single license. The parent partition is the Hyper-V host. There's no other role that is installed on there. And the Windows Server 2012 R2 Essentials runs as a virtual machine. In this capability, the licensing permits only one virtual machine. You cannot add any other virtual machine on the host or running as a virtual machine. The one that is probably most useful to more larger SMBs would be the deployment where you would run a standard or data center edition of Windows Server 2012 R2 and use the licensing there to create two or more virtual machines running as servers, one of which could be a server with the Windows Server Essentials role. And you could have other virtual machines running as perhaps a terminal server or other line of business app servers or SQL Server or even an Exchange server if you wanted to. So this is typically the more standard way that we would deploy in, say, an SMB of, say, about 5 or more users. In some cases, a single server might work, but in most cases, I would imagine that this is the way most servers would run. So one of the features of Office 365 is that you are allowed to use Office Pro Plus if you have the right edition. So if you have a P2 plan or a soon-to-come M plan or the E3 and E4 plan for Office Pro Plus, you have the ability to use Office Pro Plus. The key there is that the volume license version that you would get through open licensing is different to the usage that you get in Office 365. The primary difference, which a lot of you have heard of and we've discussed before in the mail lists and in forums all over the place, is that the volume licensing gives you the ability to use this on a terminal server. The Office 365 versions for P2 and for M do not allow this ability, whereas the E3 and E4, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, will allow you to install that on a terminal server.
Okay, so what's happening in Australia at the moment, anything purchased from Telstra, from the syndication partner, no version can be run on a terminal server. Okay, the only way that you can get it is to use an enterprise agreement, which is 250 users or above. The only plans at the moment that are available on an EA are E3 and E4. Now, come April 2014, Office 365 will be available under open licensing direct from Microsoft. So that means that you can purchase Office 365 M, E3, M and E's through volume licensing, and then when that is possible, then anything purchased then will be allowed to run on a terminal server. So at this stage, nothing from Telstra is licensed to run on a terminal server, but when Open becomes available in Australia, then the M's and the E's will allow you to run Pro Plus on a terminal server.
So that's good news coming up in April, and hopefully they will stick to that schedule. Right, carrying on, how do you actually install Office 365 and Office Pro Plus? Very straightforward. You go to the Office 365 portal and log in, and on the top right-hand side, you will see settings. So if you see settings there, you can go into the Office 365 settings, and you'll see a section called Software, Install and Manage Software. And straightforward, once you click on that, you will see a list of the latest version of Office, and all you need to do is click Install, and it will install the version for you. So this is very, this is the way that Microsoft are moving in terms of Office. And if you've installed Office 2013, you will see that it's very similar method for installation, and it's basically what they call the click-to-run edition of Office. Okay, going on to Office 365 migrations. We talked a lot about migrations, and what do you do when you have a client that has Office, that has SBS, and they want to move to small business, from small business server to Office 365? And I've gone through a number of these migrations recently, and I just saw this morning one of the other partners in another email list that I'm joined with asked the exact same question. How do you migrate a client who has got SBS 2003 and they want to move from that to Office 365 and yet continue to run the SBS 2003 until, say, next year sometime when they want to move to Essentials or another server? So I've written a blog that takes you through that, and what we could do is, let me just very quickly run through the blog. So what I'll do is, can we actually, yeah, okay, what I'll do is I'll present the screen now. Secondary monitor. Okay, hopefully the screen's loading. Okay, screen's loading. There it is.
Hang on a sec. I haven't got it yet, so just give it a moment. Yep. Okay. Good to go.
Okay. So in this blog, I basically talked about the issues that you may run into when moving from SBS Exchange to Office 365. Some of the issues will include things like how do you move your data across to Office 365 from the on-premises, and there are a number of ways you can do that. Main thing is the export-import way. A lot of people use this. They will export your current emails to PST and then import them back into Office 365. Now this works fine if you have maybe 5 to 10 users. It starts getting a little bit tedious if you have 15 to 20 users, and definitely if you have 30 users, you might not want to be doing this. MigrationWiz.com, which I'll ask Robert to comment on shortly, is a fast and easy way to move the mailboxes at a low cost. Or there is also the Office 365 Migration Wizard, and there's a lot of detail that is mentioned on how you can do this. Basically, it sets up a secondary area for migration. You move your mailboxes one at a time or a few at a time over some time without dropping your connection for your users. So your users continue to receive emails, they continue to send emails, but the data gets moved in a staged manner across to Office 365. One of the methods, if you use the import-export method, one of the biggest problems you get is with Exchange, you had some information that was tied very closely to Exchange, which causes problems. and there are ways of getting by adding the Exchange information into Office 365 so that you don't get this recipient not found issue that often happens when you do an export and import, not only for Office 365, but even from moving from different versions of Exchange or even to a different Active Directory. Has to do with the domain and the Active Directory synchronization. Now, once you have moved your data, you need to be creating users and setting up the domain in Office 365, which is pretty straightforward. With Office 365 in Wave 15, it is one of the easiest things to do now. All you need to do is set up the domain, verify the domain. It walks you through, gives you all the settings that you need, which as a note, you need to follow them exact. If you have some special ways of setting up your text and SPF records, you'll need to set it up the way that Office 365 wants first, and then change it after you've set it and verified the domain. So once you set all that up, for each user, all you need to do is just run the wizard. It will go through and install the appropriate software and ask you to connect to Office 365. And once you're connected, you will either get it all working straight away, or you will reach some problems. One of the problems, the biggest problem you'll get, is SPS often tries to intercept all these connections and assumes that it is still the Exchange server. So a lot of the clients will try to connect to the local on-premises Exchange first and come up with an error message, and you will not be able to connect. So there's a couple of tools that are quite useful. One of them is a support article here that talks about how you can connect Outlook 2007 to a hosted Exchange server and the keys that you need to change to make that work. I've done that, and in some cases it works, and in some cases it doesn't. And there's another tool from Agile IT over in the US who runs a little basic tool. All it does is it sets up something like a host file, but it tells Outlook to go and look in Office 365 rather than on the local on-premises Exchange. And one of the things that gets me every time is make sure you have updated your version of Office 2007 or Office 2010. Make sure it is updated to the latest patch, so that you don't run into problems with connections when you go to the auto discover. Right, coming back to this. All right, coming back to this, the other thing that we often see is migrating from IMAP or POP3. You need to know that Office 365 does not really support POP3. It does support IMAP, but why use that when you can connect directly using Outlook? So very similar migration technique. Your data needs to be migrated using the PST files, uploading them to Office 365. Once again, run the wizards in Office 365 and it will sort itself out. Working with internal devices, this has to do with things like printers and scanners, and also services like Shadow Protect Backup that need to send emails from within your domain. The easiest way to get this going is to set up a SMTP service within your network, probably on either your Essential server or another server, and use that as a flow on through to Office 365. The other thing you can do, there is a blog that I should have put down there, which talks about how you can use a Office 365 as the SMTP service. That's a lot it's a lot more tricky to work with, and I found that the easiest way to do it is to set up an internal SMTP service. You can get a free third-party one, or you can run the one that's built into servers, and that usually works quite well.
You can also, don't forget, you can do it on IIS, which supports on most Windows 7, Windows 8
Yes.
support, and XP has. We don't talk about XP, but it does have it in IIS, so you can do that as well.
Yep. The key there is to set up the domain properly, because if you don't and you set up a domain that Office 365 doesn't recognize, it will reject those emails coming from your server or from your network. So you've got to tweak it to make sure that those emails come through. Now I'm going to just pass through to Robert right now to talk a little bit about MigrationWiz and how useful it can be.
So MigrationWiz is a third-party service. So basically, you go to migrationwiz.com, you sign up for an account, then you basically pay in two options to migrate mailboxes. You can pay for a single shot, which means it just does one copy or one pass through the mailbox, or you can do a multi-pass through the mailbox, which is the recommended strategy. So normally what you need to have is you need to have both email servers available via the internet, so through a web page. So again, OA in SBS works fine. You give it the login details of both the mailboxes, make sure that you've given admin rights to all the mailboxes on-prem, and then you basically queue up the mailboxes and you push a button and it does the transfer. So it will then suck all the email out from the mailboxes, migrate it to Office 365 for you. And the good thing about the multi-pass is you can do it, say, a week beforehand to pick up the majority of the email. Then on the Friday before you do the cut over the MX record, you do another pass through it to pick up any differences. Change the MX record, do one last pass to make sure you haven't missed anything, and then the email's migrated over. So the big advantage to that is, one, it's a set and forget. Multipass allows you obviously to run it a number of times to pick up the mail, and another advantage of MigrationWiz is they allow you to white label it, so you can give your customer a control panel and they can go into it and find out why their mail's taking so long because they've got a 25 gig email box or something. So very much a set and forget. I will also tell you that this is not the only service that's provided. There are a number of other players in the market who are getting this way, doing these sort of things. So this is definitely the trend. The trend is that all this sort of base level stuff, migration stuff, will be just handled via tools. So there'll be no real need probably to do this more and more going forward. It'll just migrate across the cloud. So if you haven't looked at MigrationWiz, have a look. Roughly $14 or $15 per mailbox to do a multi-pass. I think it's about $10 to do a single pass, but the multi-pass is the recommended option, and used it many times. Highly recommend it. The Microsoft method does something similar, but MigrationWiz generally gives you the white labeling plus a little bit more control.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, it is something that we as IT providers definitely should be knowledgeable about. You'll get end users trying to do this, and sometimes it'll work, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's when they call an IT provider to come in. So if you've not used it before, try it out. Make sure you know how it works. Okay, a couple of little things. I'm going to talk about a few issues that we've seen so far. Some of these have not been blogged yet. We're still waiting for some blogs to happen, but there are people out there reporting issues with Essentials. One of them is the integration with Office 365 breaks when there's more than one DC present. So this is a scenario where you've got Essentials running on the network, and then you've got another DC running somewhere. And then you go and try to run the Office 365 integration wizard, and it just comes up with error after error, just does not work. And if you DC promo and demote that extra DC, the integration will work. The Microsoft team are working on this to fix up this bug. The other one is an unscheduled server backup after reboots. A number of people have mentioned this, and it's been confirmed that Susan Bradley's also blogged about it. If you reboot your server, a backup will kick off automatically, whether you like it or not. And there once again has been a confirmed thing there, and they're working to try and get that one fixed up. And we're talking about 2012 R2. A word about group policies. This is yet another thing that people have been talking about in Essentials. Actually, they were talking about this since Essentials 2011. So what happens there is, in SBS, we're all used to seeing this My Business and the whole list of computers, distribution groups, security groups, and then users, and then you'll see SBS users in there as well. And a lot of people now with Essentials suddenly realize that that whole section's not there. In actual fact, that's normal. That is what server looks like. A lot of users don't realize that, and they've been too used to SBS in the SBS world, and want to have some sort of a group policy structure that they can use to manage. Jeff Milton from the SBS Migration proposed a recommended way of doing an OU structure which would work well. He suggests that if you have domain controllers, leave them in the domain controllers area. Do not move them out of that, because Windows Server does some unique and interesting things with domain controllers and assumes that they're all there. You can create a company, or if you like, you can create My Business or whatever, and under there create users, groups, and computers. And under computers, this is where you might want to create desktops, laptops, other servers, RDP servers. And this is especially useful if you're applying group policies to various types of systems. And one immediate use for this is the CryptoLocker prevention that third tier have put out, which talks about how you can protect your desktops and your laptops and servers from allowing the CryptoLocker to run. Basically, it implements a group policy rollout of policies that will prevent executables from running from specific areas on the machines. And so it's useful then to have specific types of OUs so that you can manage your domain much better. So a word about licensing. One of the biggest issues in Essentials which has come out is the way that the licensing works. And the reason why this is so is because for the first time in a long time, well, for the first time, we are now back to basically two SKUs, standard and DC. There is foundation, and there is actually still an essential SKU. My guess is that in the next release we might even lose that. So with licensing, you need to know what kind of CALs you need, and whether you need server CALs, or whether you need RDS CALs. And RDS is one of the big issues, especially with the remote web access. With Essentials, we previously did not require CALs. If you had Essentials, you could run up to 25 users without needing CALs. You could run a remote web access directly to your connected computers without needing RDS CALs. If you have Server 2012 and Server 2012 R2 standard or Data Center Edition, you need CALs. That's the bottom line. You will need CALs if you run remote web access. You will need RDS CALs. You will need server CALs regardless. Or rather, you will need user CALs for each user. So that is the main issue with licensing. In essence, it is actually a good thing, because it now trains us to think more about licensing per user. One of the biggest issues we had with Essentials in the past was you would get 25 free users in Essentials, but the moment you added another server into the mix, you needed user CALs. So if you had 15 users, you suddenly needed to buy 15 users. Or if you went to 30 users, you now exceeded Server 2012 Essentials, and so you needed to buy not just 5 user cows, but the whole 30 user cows, and that became a major issue. So with licensing, if you start off right in the beginning and purchase cows, it doesn't really matter. If you're going to add 5, you add 5 later. If you need to add 10, you add 10. But in the beginning, you've bought the number of user cows that you require for your domain. So that's one of the areas that a lot of people get hung up on in terms of licensing. So, are there any questions?
So what we'll do is let me just thank Boon very much for his presentation. Just let me stop the recording.